friends. Hi, Paul and Sam. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Thanks to anybody who's watching this recording in the future. I'm Rachel. I'm going to talk today about this idea that I've landed upon relating to the notion that the economic system that we're all born into, if we if we've grown up in a capitalistic country anyway, although I think this applies to communist countries as well, and I'll talk more about that. The idea that the dysfunction in that system, which I think a lot of us are still not even considering because we're so indoctrinated into it, because we grow up in it and there is agency within it. We do have some freedom to pursue what we're interested in, to imagine and carve out a life that we want in a way that maybe wasn't available to most people to the same degree, say, under feudalism or something. Paul's like, yes, yeah. It's late for Paul. It's nice that you joined so late. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, and I want to get this idea out there. I want to encourage more of us to be thinking about and questioning the design of these systems, in part because, especially in the country where I live, in the US, under the current political regime, I think we're really being shown the dysfunction in some of these systems, maybe even in most of these systems, cannot be denied, and in fact really needs to be addressed because some very bad things are starting to happen in the US. I mean, if you read the news, it's easy to see that. I'm doing these lives more frequently lately, and I've been kind of approaching them sort of like uh, intuitively moving to what I felt inspired to speak about on that particular day. And in doing so, I'm finding it's been kind of interesting to me, at least, to see that I'm realizing I'm covering various facets of why Seeds exists and what Seeds does. What Seeds is a social good project I founded years ago now. It's a blockchain. It's founded on the blockchain. It uses blockchain tools, decentralized tools, to help us transcend what I feel is a lot of the dysfunction in the old systems. And I'll talk more specifically about how that works. And I've been doing these lives now expressly because we have a course coming up with a deadline in 6 days, Thursday, May 22nd, called How to Build Abundance in Cryptocurrency. It's effectively free when you pay in full upfront because it includes Seeds cryptocurrency with the tuition. For some reason, people use tuition in quotes whenever they reference this, and so I just did that too. But what you would pay to join the course includes Seeds with it, which makes it free. You can attend any future live session of this course that I teach. I've committed to doing it once per year, so this is the 2025 version. And in terms of like what I can offer you through the course, I'm a former pro stock trader who traded in Chicago and Wall Street. I started trading when the markets were crashing in April 2008. So just at the very beginning of what ended up becoming the Great Recession. And I still was able to figure out ways to make money profitably, to profitably trade within that environment. And I can bring that knowledge to folks who join the course, as well as the knowledge that led me to recognize and start buying Bitcoin when it was about $90 a coin in 2013. And from there, I founded Seeds because I recognized that this new technology, blockchain technology, which is decentralized, offered these really exciting opportunities to rebuild the old economic system that just weren't possible whenever we were restricted to centralized design, where banks hold custody of our funds and so forth. It doesn't have to be that way in decentralized systems. We can retain custody of our own money while making passive incomes off of it at the same time when we're using decentralized tools. And this, I mentioned this in the last live that I did, but this really hit home further in a personal way for me just a couple of days ago. Because, for example, I got news that a centralized cryptocurrency exchange that I've used for many years, that I've recommended to people, in fact, through our course, as Paul probably remembers, I'd recommended them to dozens and dozens, if not a couple hundred people who have come through the course over the years. And I had trusted them with my money. They're a centralized exchange. They had custody of my money, which is something we just take for granted because that's the structure of the old centralized system. Banks also have custody of our money, obviously. And there are laws that are supposed to protect us so that they don't screw us over. But those laws didn't protect me when the centralized cryptocurrency exchange, which I can name, I thought I couldn't say their name. I can say their name, it's Gemini. They ripped me off about 5 years ago and took ether that was mine. It was worth several thousands of dollars then. It's worth a lot more than that now. And a couple days ago, I was told that they're going to get away with it, basically, after I fought this long and very draining legal battle. The lesson there is that when we're using decentralized tools, that can't happen. And to be fair to myself and to all of us, it is still necessary in many cases to use something like a centralized cryptocurrency exchange because in the regulatory environment as it exists right now, it's difficult to trade cryptocurrency. Like you can't buy cryptocurrency with your local currency, the GBP, um, the rupee, the US dollar, the AUD, whatever your local currency is where you live without using these centralized exchanges, which is why I had been forced to use them. And there really are no good options. There are no good centralized cryptocurrency exchanges. I regret to say. So that was why I did it at that time. And yeah, it was a personal lesson. I've talked about this. I almost worry that I've already talked about it too much, but it really struck a lot of the wounding that I still have regarding how we can just be exploited so that our basic needs aren't met. This is a lot of money for me. It's money that would go to helping others as well because I put a lot of my personal money into seeds. And they could just take that. And yeah, it's really awful. It's like the modern form of that's a more common, I think, type of exploitation that we see when there are abuses of power. It's through the quote unquote legal system, and it's somebody with a lot of power and a lot of money leveraging lawyers to do something like this. Anyway, so the course that I teach sustains seeds so that we can continue doing the work that we do to transcend the dysfunction in that old system. Through seeds, you can help someone in need and receive seeds, cryptocurrency, and thanks. And the idea there is that wouldn't it make for a better system if the people who participated in the system could build wealth because you helped others, because you were kind? If we could transcend this old nonprofit for profit binary that only exists because within the realm of late stage capitalism, within its bounds, there is no space for giving. There's no belief that giving is a thing. It's not a value within that system as articulated by Adam Smith and so forth. I also thought that I should mention that in terms of my background and so forth. So I went to Duke University for undergrad and I was briefly an economics major. I ended up graduating with a minor. As I understand, I think this is still true. It was definitely true when I was an undergrad. The largest employer of Duke undergrad graduates is Goldman Sachs, the the investment firm in New York. They're based in New York. They're probably thought to be like the fanciest bank, I would say, and they're not thought to be super, like, they're kind of evil. I would say is my impression. I actually got, this was sort of weird and interesting to me. A few years ago, somebody from there, like somebody kind of high up there who manages large amounts of money for them, reached out to me cold over email. I guess they have this thing where they track founders and figure that if you're a founder and your organization is still around after X number of years, you probably have enough money for them to want to talk to you. So that was surprising that they did that. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that the university I went to was a funnel for this iBank, which makes a lot of money, is not necessarily ethically terrific. And in those economics classes, the reason that I switched from an economics major to an economics minor ultimately had a lot to do with how dumb like the design of the economic system seemed to be. It presumed, like, a core presumption that I took away from those economics classes was that economic theory was founded in this idea that people are rational, that they behave rationally the vast majority of the time, if not all of the time. And we know that that is not true. It points to, I think, the larger foundational issue that I'm going to talk more about, which is that these systems that are dying at this point in history, in my view, they are grounded in this what I refer to as wounded masculine energy, an over reliance on the idea that rational the rational is best. The rational is the highest form of the most valuable framework for looking at things. Um, Ideas about productivity, that being productive is the most important thing. We should feel guilty if we're not productive, quote unquote, which I know is something that was really instilled in me and in certainly other students I went to school with. You need to be productive, and if you're not being productive, you should feel really bad about yourself, because what are you doing if you're not being productive? Even though, as I mentioned in other lives, there are studies out there that show that in terms of if you're working a job, 40-hour work week, productivity. I misspoke in a previous session. I caught it after when I watched the recording, but people working an 8-hour workday apparently are productive for less than 3 hours of that workday. So there are all of these sort of myths baked into the economic system about how we're supposed to function, assumptions about how we already function. And it just seemed dumb. And I think I recognize that. I mean, I certainly, like I said, I changed my major and got the economics minor ultimately. But I really started to recognize this even more so down the line once I started working as a pro stock trader and just seeing, I mean, I think it's perhaps most extreme in that area of finance, or maybe it's most extreme a degree further in venture capital, which I'll talk a little bit about. But yeah, you really see like it was manufactured scarcity. If I made a dollar, somebody else had to lose that dollar. That doesn't make any sense because money is not scarce. It creates these winner take all paradigms that leave people in this competitive frame of mind, which doesn't make sense because it's a manufactured paradigm, as I said. And I mean, I love a good competition. I played sports. I enjoy sports. I love playing games. I love like board games, whatever. That doesn't mean that a quote unquote competitive framework as a founding principle, a founding organizational principle, is what is best for humans when it comes to something like a money system that completely surrounds us, that is so it's like it's the water and we're the fish. We're just in this environment where we grow up from birth, and we know that we need money. We know that we're going to need money to survive. If our parents don't make a lot of money, we realize that that's made life harder for us as children. There are all of these decisions that we have to make on a daily basis that are about money. And for a lot of us, about the scarcity surrounding money. Oh, I can only do this because I only have this amount of money. Oh, I'd love to do this. This is a dream that I have, but I need this amount of money to do it, and it's really hard to get that amount of money, and so forth. So Seeds is addressing that, in that you can redeem a single seed to ask for any amount of money that you may need in USD and receive that as a gift from the community. To be clear, a system like Seeds can only work if there is a balance between giving and taking. And that, I think, is the core reason that Seeds hasn't blown up so far. I mean, and that's a relative thing. I mean, in 2021, in the last cryptocurrency market cycle, when everything was going gangbusters, Seeds went up a lot, and there was a lot of money moving through the sector, but it wasn't the right spirit. I think that's something I've really learned over the last year, especially. Seeds really needs to be aligning with people who are kind, giving, generous people who are interested in transcending the old system. And when I talk about the course again, what I want to offer through that is the knowledge and experience that I have garnered as somebody who used to be a pro stock trader, who started trading cryptocurrency 12 years ago almost, and what I have learned about how decentralization can work to both benefit us and at the same time help others. That's what the course is meant to do. In terms of the economic system, today I wanted to talk about, let's talk about Rushkoff, okay? There is this guy, he's an American media theorist called Douglas Rushkoff. He went to Princeton, I believe. I think it says that here. Yep, Cal Arts. So this is an article that he published some time ago. The title, as you can see, is "We Shouldn't Blame Silicon Valley for Technology's Problems. We Should Blame Capitalism." And I think he published, yeah, this is from 2019, January of 2019. And here he says, technology is not driving itself. It doesn't want anything. Rather, there is a market expressing itself through technology. It has an operating system, an OS. This operating system is called capitalism, and it drives the anti-human agenda in our society at least as much as any technology. So he published this in January of 2019, as I said. Since that time, things have gotten, I think, a lot more extreme, particularly in the way that we've seen. Let's see if I can look up like billionaires at Trump's inauguration. It autofills it. Yeah, so here was a picture that's showing up for you, right? So we can see Zuckerberg is there. Bezos is there. That's Patel, right? The guy that's running the FBI now? Or is that the guy that's running Google? I think that is. Did he go there too? Is his name Sundar Pichai, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. The point is that I think of Google as more ethical than these other big tech companies. Look, it's auto-filling Sundar Pichai Trump inauguration. Paul, am I pronouncing that like even close to correctly? Please correct me if I'm wrong. That's so disappointing. I didn't realize he was there. Anyway, so since Rushkoff published this in 2019, this idea of the OS of big tech being capitalism, I think is just veered. It's like gone 100 miles an hour, even further in the wrong direction. And Musk is the most extreme example of this, and the way he's the way that he uh, potentially interfered with the election. I mean, there are rumors circulating surrounding that. But I mean, he gave hundreds of millions of dollars, as I understand. I don't know the precise donation amount to Trump. And he was trying to dodge, I think there were 17 different federal investigations into Musk and his companies prior to Trump's election. It seems quite clear that a significant part of his motivation, if not the vast majority of it, had to do with getting Trump elected, because then he figured Trump would stop these inquiries into what he was doing. And then that happened, and now he's actively interfering with American democracy in a really deeply troubling way and actively contributing to the rise of fascism in this country. Musk wouldn't exist without venture capitalists. Let me see if I can find this picture. Oh, this is really funny. I could find it on the Teal blog, or on the Teal blog, on the Seeds blog, if I can't find it here. Okay, there's this picture of them. Yep. Okay. Y'all can see that, right? See if you can see it big here. This is from the mid-90s, I believe. Oh, Peter Thiel thinks Elon Musk is a fraud. Look at this paywall. Okay, we can just go back here. We see this picture. It's Peter Thiel, another billionaire who's done a lot of damaging things. And Musk next to him. No shade to people who are balding, but something that's really funny to me is that on the Seeds website, so we have this blog, right? And we maintain it regularly. There are posts at least once a month or so at this point in time. And years ago, I used a post. Let me see if I can find it actually. Seeds gives blog crypto bros. Why? Yeah. So I wrote this in May of 2021, or published it then anyway. White billionaire crypto bro culture needs to die. Yeah. Okay. So I use this picture here. What is funny about this is, so this was published almost 4 years ago, right? Just very recently, Seeds got an email from somebody who's threatening us for using this picture, trying to get us to pay a licensing fee. No one has said anything about that before now. And I really, as soon as I saw it, I really wondered, like, is Elon Musk trying to erase this picture from the internet? Because it kind of seems like probably that's what's happening. So, I mean, we're just ignoring it. But it was just really funny that that happened. So, the reason that these guys exist, the reason that because Thiel is also problematic, he's smarter than Musk, in my view. He's stayed a little bit quieter, but he was vocally supporting Trump in 2016 when it seemed even more outrageous at that time for for a tech bro billionaire to do that. But he was not vocal in the same way in the recent election. And he's done other problematic things like writing essays about how women shouldn't have gotten the vote. Yeah, he's just problematic in a bunch of ways. But what powered the rise of these people, these men, is venture capital. As I touched on earlier, I think I would say that venture capital is the most extreme example of the dysfunction in the current economic system. It's a very privileged area because, I mean, the people within it are educated, they're almost all male. A lot of them went to business school, which doesn't make sense because assessing entrepreneurs is not something that people who go to business school, I would say, are good at. It's kind of the opposite thing. Let's get these guys off the screen. I don't want to look at that picture anymore. But the reason that Musk and Thiel were able to do what they did, and to be clear, I'm not saying it's not difficult to be an entrepreneur. It's hard. It's very difficult. If you watch my channel at all, you've heard me voice the difficulties surrounding that in many ways, but it is much easier if you have support and funding. In fact, it's nearly impossible if you don't have enough funding. And venture capital, as I've said many times at this point, it gives over 98% of all of the dollars that it has available, all of the funding that it has available. And this is an American problem, but it's also a global problem, to men, to male founded tech organizations. So, as a female founder of a tech organization, I have had to make do with a tiny fraction of the amount of funding that I saw my male counterparts raise very easily. The most extreme example of this, and I mean, you can't say it's one to one because there's nobody doing exactly what I'm doing who is pitching exactly the same investors and so forth. But years ago now, I dated this guy who was also the founder of a cryptocurrency project. I actually met him through a cryptocurrency. It was in a Bitcoin, actually, a Bitcoin focused startup accelerator that Seeds went through, and his company was going through it as well. And I ended up dating him for a while. And through the course of that relationship, I kept telling him that I thought that the idea he was working on wasn't going to work and that there was a better opportunity if he looked at the developing world. I think I said this probably 15 times or something. And eventually he listened to it and he changed what he was working on. And then he took this idea that I'd given him and he quickly raised $5 million in venture capital funds with my idea. And that was okay. I mean, I shared that with him because I was okay with it being used, but I would have appreciated some form of credit. And even when I explicitly asked, he said no. And then his company failed, like not too long after. And that's how it often goes with, I mean, I'm not saying that he was he was a very salesy type person, the kind of person who's going to be among the best at raising money from maybe the less sophisticated VCs, honestly. And I'm not saying this to condemn him, although there were other problematic things there for sure. I'm just sharing this as an example to say that, like, that's how it goes. Like, and I think it would be hard to find an example that was more extreme than that, where literally if a guy is pitching the woman's idea, he gets $5 million. Meanwhile, the thing that I've been working on for many, many years has gotten a tiny fraction of funding. So that created the types of people that are now who are now creating these larger problems within the American democratic system, within tech at large. It Zuckerberg less so because, I mean, actually, Thiel funded Zuckerberg, didn't he? I think Thiel put $500,000 into Facebook, like back in the day. I'm almost certain now that I think about it. So one of these guys is funding another one, and they're both problematic and become more problematic down the line. I'm not saying that they're not smart people or that they didn't do something that had some value to some extent, but at this point, I think we're tipping over into things being much more negative than positive in terms of like the net effects of what they've done. VC is possible in this economic system. It's okay for this sector to be that discriminatory for that long because it hasn't gotten any better in the many years now that I've been involved in the tech sector. The numbers stay essentially the same, and I know why. I mean, it's just a lot harder if you're a female founder. And I'm just kind of built for this and I can just keep going and so forth. And I think it's going to be huge at some point. So I've I've always believed in that. I've never doubted it for a second. So someone like me can keep going and do it, but it's it's a lot harder, and it chases people out because it's so much harder. And it's hard anyway. It's hard if you're the most privileged white guy who ever lived, who went to fancy schools and whatever. I mean, if we're talking about Gemini, the co-founders of Gemini, who went to Harvard and have a dad that was already worth $100 million back then, they still complained a lot about things that were hard for them. That's part of their justification for giving so much money to Trump, in fact. It is hard though. It's challenging for everybody. What I want to say though is that we need to shift away from these systems in which there's that strata, there's that extreme at one end of the spectrum where the most privileged people in society are given these often very quickly written easy checks. And okay, I've gotten some quick checks when raising myself for seeds. That's occasionally happened to me. It's just been a lot smaller amounts of money and it's been much more rare than what I've seen in male counterparts experiences. But this extreme shouldn't exist because we're seeing how it's playing out. Trump is a similar thing, sort of, in the sense that his dad was very wealthy and did a lot of terrible things to raise that money, including overtly racist practices in the 70s. He just wasn't a good dude. And then Trump has done various scammy things that we've seen proven out over time. But there's something about the wealth that those folks were given that made their egos even more dangerous to be around, I think. And in a better economic system, one like seeds, I always say like seeds as though there's something else, but I'm not aware of anything else that's like seeds. In fact, I just want to be inclusive, I guess. Hopefully, some other systems that are working on these problems will show themselves more as well. In a system like seeds, where it's possible by design to build wealth because you helped others, it's not going to create those same problems because if it's giving, if you're giving and you're coming from, a generous, a truly generous spirit, a true intention of helping others, and then you're building wealth as a result of that, that's just a very, very different dynamic. It's very different than somebody who thinks they're entitled because their dad was rich and he was racist and he ripped people off, and you think that you're entitled to scam the taxpayers of New York and various things that Trump did coming up in his career. It's a very different thing. So foundationally, if that is to shift, I think that would address a lot of the problems within the capitalistic system. Other pieces of that from sort of the opposite end of the spectrum or the middle of the spectrum is that, like for most of us, we're fortunate if we're able to get an education, if we're able to go to college at all, if we're able to go to a good college, that's a huge boon. And then if we can get a well-paying job and live a comfortable life, and often those jobs are at corporations, then that for many people is the dream, understandably. And our education system, at least in the country where I live, but I think this is true in a lot of places, is in essence designed to help us grow up to be good workers within the system. The idea of getting a job it's just like taken for granted. Of course you should get a job, especially at this moment in history where there's less gender discrimination in the workforces. So, if I were speaking to you somehow we wouldn't be online. Obviously, 50 years ago, it'd be a different thing in terms of where like feminism had, to the degree that feminism had progressed and provided opportunities for women in the workforce. And when you're forced out of a thing, when you're not allowed into it, when you can't get a job because of misogyny, then that makes it look more attractive, right? It makes it seem like, oh yeah, I want to do this because they won't let me do it. But now that we're at this stage in history, I think we really need to start questioning a system that is just that is bringing us up to assume that, yeah, of course I need to get a job. If I don't, I'm an asshole. If I don't, then I'm lazy, or I'm I'm taking things for granted. I think I'm better than other people. Whatever negative associations with that idea may be ingrained within us by the system, in large part because jobs are going away. We're at this inflection point that I think is very interesting in terms of what's happening with AI. Oh, yo, the Nobel laureate who is credited with doing a lot to uh, make progress for it. Look, these dudes again. Can you see that? Actually, sorry, I'm not on the right tab. Let's look him up. Nobel laureate AI. He's American and Canadian. Or no, I think he's British Canadian. I think Jeffrey Hinton might be his name. Yep, that's him. I watched this video recently. If you're interested, I'd suggest looking him up. It already had a bunch of views, and it just came out a couple weeks ago, I think. And he was talking about, yeah, this is it right here. CBS Mornings. I can put the link in the description if anyone's interested.
Together, we go places.
Sorry. Okay. I'll put the link in the description in the chat just in case it's of interest to y'all. It won't let me do it because it's so long. Sorry. I'd have to find it from a different, like, not from search here. Mute.
We see old friends and try new things. From how we
Like, which different tools do you use?
It's
Okay.
here. This is it. The federal government just came out with some new regulations that allows you to buy real estate
Sorry if that took too long.
with less
Oh,
money
still
down
won't let
than
me share
ever
it. Why won't
before.
let me share it?
Less than
Anyway,
5%.
if you feel like
I'll show
looking
you how
this
to
up,
do it.
it's totally
with
worth
no
watching
money down.
Jeffrey
I'll show you how to
Hinton
do it with
talk
no
about this.
credit. I'll show you how to do it on
He's
a 2
credited
unit,
with,
4 units.
you know, essentially driving so much of the progress that has been made in AI. And he talks about how he's 77 years old, as I recall. And he says he's glad that he's kind of glad that he's 77 because it means he's going to die before he sees a lot of what's going to happen with AI. And he talks about how the progress has been much more rapid than he expected. And there isn't, big tech corporations are not doing nearly enough to research safety and to make sure that the development is safe, that what they're doing does not later cause harm to people. And I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be, if a lack of that sort of basic showing of responsibility is going to be what brings about the downfall of some of these more corrupt big tech organizations. But anyway, this was kind of fascinating and I recommend it, as I said. And he talked about how we're at this inflection point in terms of AI. And AI will take a lot of the jobs that humans currently do. And that is good. That's a good thing. If we're freed up so that we're not required to do rote tasks, then we have more opportunity to do other things that are more appropriate for humans to be doing, right? During the pandemic, I found it kind of fascinating that there was a lot of conversation, at least in the country where I live in the US, surrounding like a mental health crisis surfacing during the pandemic. So many people didn't have anything to do. They weren't going to their jobs necessarily, or they were working from home. From my perspective, my life changed very little because I'd worked remotely for so long already. Seeds had been working remotely for years before that. The pandemic made it seem less weird that we had operated that way for a long time. And yeah, there was this discussion about these mental health problems surfacing, and it was framed as though it was a result of what had happened in the pandemic because people weren't going to their jobs. That was a big part of the reason, I would say, as I understood that people, psychologists and so forth were discussing this problem. But what I think was happening is that because people didn't have that distraction in the same way during that time, a lot of the stuff that they needed to heal that they couldn't and weren't facing necessarily because they had the distraction of going to their jobs, it was able to surface. That's something that I've learned through Vipassana meditation, that when you when you're still, when you're doing the practice, things just start to come on the surface that need to be healed. And maybe they weren't even in your awareness. And then they start to release, and then your life starts to get better. But if we're not aware of how that process can work, and if we just start to see the signs of these negativities surfacing, and we immediately think like, oh, that's a bad thing, I need to take medication to suppress it or whatever. Not that I'm in any way suggesting that medication should not be used whenever it's advised by a professional. You got to do what's right for you. But there was this misunderstanding, I think, of what a lot of what was going on. And I think we're going to see more of that as more jobs go away, and we're going to need to address it. But it's also a great gift because if we have that freedom of time as jobs go away, then we'll be able to do that healing. And I know I can at least, I can speak for myself. I'm so much healthier and happier than I was 10 years ago, even though it might not, like, maybe you could look at video of me back there where I seem cheerful and stuff. But I know that I've cleared out so much stuff that was holding me down because I've had access to this practice, because I've learned about Vipassana. And as more and more people are freed from having to trade our time for money to get money to survive within, because that's how it works within the structure of the old system, I think more of that's going to be happening. And Seeds is about helping us with that transition. It would be great if governments also stepped up and started offering things like universal basic income, for example. We know that that works well. There are studies that show how well it works. We know it improves outcomes within a society for a lot of people, but it's just in the current climate, the current political climate, certainly where I live, we're not going to see that for a while. So Seeds is working to provide something like that. You can redeem a seed and ask for the money you need to live for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, so that you don't have to work a job during that time. Of course, the community has to then give you those funds. And when they give to you, they receive Seeds cryptocurrency of an equal or greater value in thanks. So that makes the gift net neutral to them anyway. And when that happens, then you can just receive that gift and use it for whatever you need to use it for? And I think that that is the direction that we need to go. And that can't exist. It doesn't exist within the old economic system. I mean, it's only something that governments provide, right? Maybe some charities provide a form of that as well, but all of that exists outside of the structure of, for-profit capitalism. I wanted to touch on one last idea. I've already gone a little longer than I thought. I'm pretty passionate about this notion. So Rushkoff says, what he said about this notion of the problem being that the OS of big tech is capitalism. I'm of the view, based on my experience as a woman, as a female founder of a tech organization, as somebody who thinks a lot about energies, and I always feel that it's important to mention things like astrology, the types of things that if you mention typically in tech or STEM type conversations, you're immediately sort of a pariah because they're very dismissed. That doesn't mean there isn't some value in having an awareness of how these things work. And I've come to be very convinced through my interest in spirituality, through my Vipassana practice, through my limited understanding of astrology. I don't know a ton about astrology, but I do know that we're thought to be at this sort of inflection point in that sense as well, in terms of the energies on Earth. We're thought to be moving through ascension to 5D. There's this idea of the rise of feminine energies to bring things back into balance, because we've been in this wounded masculine energy, and our systems therefore built within that energy for a really long time, for millennia, I think. And we're shifting away from that. And I think, as I've shared before, that that's the role that somebody like Trump is actually playing. Little does he know. He's making it really obvious that these old systems, because they permitted him to happen, are not working in the way that they were intended. They're not working very well. And now, I mean, we could talk for a long time about the really alarming things that are already happening. I mean, detention of people just because they're brown without due process, a concentration camp in El Salvador, and a guy who wasn't supposed to go there, who's there by mistake. They're not going to bring him back. Like it's horrifying stuff already. And judges are taking actions, whatever. People are suing the White House. But what is that practically doing in the day to day? That man is still in this prison. As far as I know, I haven't checked the news today, but I don't think he is out. And it points to the idea that authoritarianism, fascism is rising here. And I think that that is perhaps the grossest expression of these wounded masculine energies. And it's happening within these systems. If we're shifting to new kinds of systems like seeds, which are intentionally built from the ground up with this idea of a healthy balance of feminine energy and masculine energy, healthy masculine energy in mind from the beginning, yin and yang energies. And to be very clear, I'm speaking about energies. I believe that these energies exist in people of all genders. And we've all been conditioned to kind of skew toward this wounded masculine energy, myself included, because you're rewarded for it in these systems. You're rewarded if you're really productive. And that's great if you're productive. Productivity is not a bad thing. But this focus on that above all else isn't healthy for us. We also need rest. We also need to be receptive. Creativity is really important. Nurturance is really important. All of these things that are associated with divine feminine energies are of equal importance to those things associated with healthy masculine energies. And that balance, I think, is what we're working toward as a society, as human beings. And so I think that shift is happening, and I think it's very important to talk about it in these conversations. And I am utterly convinced that seeds plays a pivotal role both in moving us through that transition and then thriving a- after it's sort of already happened. I think that's the reason I've had such a challenging time in keeping seeds going at certain moments throughout its years long history now. I mean, seeds, I guess it's been around for 12 years now or something like that. I always forget exactly what it was, either 2012 or 2013 that it was officially incorporated. And so these shifts are happening. These old energies are really trying to attack the newer energies that are coming in to transcend what's not working in the old. And seeds is a part of that. And so I think I've kind of caught some strays a little bit, or I guess they're not strays because seeds is actively working to do this thing. So it's been more challenging for us and for me personally at certain moments in time. But I think that's just kind of par for the course. That's how a big transition like this, of course, it makes sense that it would go that way. So I think that's the root problem. And if we're shifting to systems that are not of this wounded masculine energy, that are grounded intentionally and thoughtfully in a healthy balance from the ground up, like seeds. And again, I'm saying like seeds, but I don't know of any other system that is like this. I wish I knew of more, but I don't. I don't know that they exist yet. If we're coming from that more balanced space, it's going to create better outcomes for everybody. It's not going to get us into these situations where there are these extremes where, somebody who is the biggest beneficiary of the old system in recorded history, Elon Musk, because he's the richest man in recorded history, can start actively doing things to promote the rise of fascism in a country that used to lead the world in terms of this idea of democratic ideals. I'm almost embarrassed now when I see like an American flag, and I'm sorry to say that because it's come to represent something else. And also, we could have a longer conversation about how like nation states probably shouldn't exist anyway. I think we need to get past that organizational structure as well. But all of that said, I think the antidote to this moment in time something that I learned as somebody, like who thinks of myself as an activist and who has done various things over many years to try and bring about social change. It's often very discouraging work, right? It can be very heartbreaking even at times when you see the other side have a victory, which I think I experienced in my own personal way this week when this ruling in Gemini's favor came out. It can be really yeah, just it can feel very tragic. I think I don't want to in any way undercut how painful that can feel when you're doing this work to bring about change for what you believed will be a better world, and then you see the forces acting against that win. Vipassana helps a lot with that. After I recently did a Vipassana meditation course at my house, and I like documented it and made a video. And after the course, it didn't happen during the course. After the course, I realized I had a deeper understanding of equanimity for a period of time. I started to understand how things that I perceived to be bad were the same as things that I perceived to be good, in that they would all change. And I knew that intellectually for many years, but it was like I had a deeper experiential understanding, and therefore I wasn't getting so sad when those signs of bad things were showing themselves. But it changed. Like I'm not developed enough yet that I'm at that level consistently, but hopefully I'll get there sometime soon because it would help a lot with the work that I'm trying to do. As these things are happening, as these news events are shown that can be extremely upsetting and even terrifying, something we can do instead of like we can and should set boundaries around that for sure. But something I've learned is that resistance is a form of perpetuation. When we resist a thing, it can make it persist. I talk a lot about this Buckminster Fuller quote. I won't pull it up right now, but this idea, he was an American futurist who lived in the 20th century, and he talks about this idea that the way to affect change isn't to fight the existing system. The way to affect change is to create a new system that renders the old system obsolete. So that's what Seeds is working to do. So what we can do now, particularly this moment in time, is channel energies and attention and resourcing into uplifting a system like Seeds so that it can grow more quickly and help us get out of this situation more quickly at the same time. So if that resonates with you, the course is coming up, as I said. And you're also invited, if you'd like, to make a gift through Seeds. You'll receive Seeds cryptocurrency and thanks. It's as easy as giving on any site. You just literally, you can give with a card. Excuse me. And those links will be in the description if you're watching this video later. They're in the description anyway if you're watching the video live as well. So please consider that. As I mentioned before, the course deadline is 6 days from today, next Thursday, May 22nd, just before midnight Pacific time. If this resonates, yeah, I'd love to have you. We really need to find more like-minded people who are interested in these ideas, but maybe just haven't known where to turn, hadn't known that something like Seeds existed, that we can actually help to grow, we can actually use in a practical sense, because idealistic notions and grand ideas are exciting and fun. I love living in the world of ideas. I love having discussions about how society can evolve. But at the same time, we need practical solutions that work today. And Seeds, while not perfect, is a practical solution aligning with these ideals, which works today and has been working for some time. So consider joining the course if that resonates. Consider making a gift to help someone in need through Seeds, and you'll get, in both cases, you'll get Seeds cryptocurrency and thanks. And I'll leave it at that. It doesn't look like we have any questions or anything. It looks like Sam just put a ton of emojis. Yeah, so thank y'all so much for joining live. Paul and Sam, if you're still here, if there are any lurkers, thank you too. If you're watching this watching the recording version, thanks for hanging out this long. And I'll be around again on a live soon. I'm going to do vertical lives like Paul suggested to experiment with those too. And yeah, I'll be back again before the course closes on Thursday, May 22nd. So if you want to join again, I'd love to see you. And that's it, I think. Okay, y'all. Thank you for your time and attention. And I'll catch you later. Bye.